All right, for exercise 7, we have, I think the later problems are a little easier to do. They're just less time intensive. How about that? So for exercise 7, we have on January 1st, year 1, Foxcraft issued 100 bonds with a face value of $1,000 for $104,100. The bonds had a stated rate of 6% and paid interest semi-annually. What is the entry to record the issuance of the bonds? Okay, so let's figure out how we sold them first. So we sold them, it doesn't tell us what, if we sold them at 100 or whatever, but it says we sold $100,000 in bonds, and we sold them for $104,000. And we know that they sold them, they had a 6% rate, oops, what did I do there? 6% rate when the market rate, doesn't tell us what the market rate was, but we know it was more, it had to be more than what it was at par, because if it was at par, we would have sold it at 100,000. So we know we sold it at a premium. We know it. We sold it for 104,000 bonds that were only 100,000. So we're gonna go to our bond cheat sheet, and we are going to look at bonds sold at a premium. So over 100,000. It just says 110% just because it's an example. Market interest rate is lower than the bond interest rate. So our bond is selling at a higher interest rate than what the market is. So the entry for that is cash is debited. So let's debit cash. What date? On January 1. So January 1 of 2020. We got cash. We received cash, and we're going to debit it for 104,000. Then we're going to credit bonds payable, premium on bonds payable, and bonds payable. So the bonds payable is going to be what the bond is, and then the premium on the bonds payable is going to be what the difference is. So we have, doesn't matter what order you write it in, premium on bonds payable, unless it's credited, for $4,000, and then bonds payable for 100,000. And we did this in previous problems, but we're going to take this and we'll stretch it out over the life of the bond, and we'll take that gain and we'll break it down over the life of the bond. So E8, we are taking Medhurst Corporation issued $90,000 in bonds for $87,000. The bonds had a stated rate of 8% and pay interest quarterly. What is the journal entry to record the sale of the bonds? Okay, so we sold. Says that we sold, so let's just do our little thing. We sell it for a discount if it's less than what the market is, and we sell it for a premium if it's more than what the market is. So the bonds were $90,000, and we took $87,000 for them. So we sold them for less than the value of the bond, the face value. So we took a discount. So we're going to go to our cheat sheet. We're going to look at bonds sold at a discount. So we put cash, discount on bonds payable, we debit for what the difference is, and then the bonds payable is whatever the bond is, the amount, the face value. So in this case, I'm going to do a little different, and I'm going to actually credit the bonds payable, and we'll work backwards. So the bonds payable is going to be $90,000. We just had to sell it for a discount, less than $90,000 to sell it, because it was not appealing to very many people. I'm just going to put January 1st, because it doesn't tell us the date. So the cash we received was less than we're going to owe when this bond is due. we received 87,000. So we received 3,000 less than we should have. Not that we should have, but we had to take that much of a discount because our bond wasn't paying as high as interest rates as everything else. So we have discount on bonds payable, which is the difference between how much we got and how much we're going to owe at the end. And we debit it, it's a loss, and we're going to stretch that over the life of the bond. Okay, then 9. So for 9, we have, on January 1, year 1, Foxcraft issued 100 bonds with a face value of $1,000 for $104,000. The bond has a stated rate of 6%, paid interest semi-annually. What is the journal entry to record the first payment to bondholders? So this one's super simple. We're going to go to the payment of the interest, which if you go to my little cheat sheet, actually I should update it because the interest, this one is going to look the same here as well. If you sold it just at face value, that's just going to be there. It's going to look the same. Okay, so we're going to look at, it doesn't matter, honestly, because they're all going to be the same. The interest expense in cash payment is the same, whether it's sold at par, at a premium, or at a discount. It looks the same. Interest expense, cash. So it really doesn't matter which one you look at. It's always going to be interest expense and cash. But we did sell this one for a premium. So, I mean, it's good to know that, but it actually doesn't affect this calculation at all. It says we are paying 6% semi-annually. So it's going to be the $100,000 bond times 6% times semi-annually, so 0.5. So that's going to be our interest. So 100,000 times 6% times 0.5. I got an extra character in there. All right, so 30,000. I got an extra 0 in there. That's what I did. I have it times 60%. There. Gotta make sure your decimals are in the right place. 3,000, that looks better. And we're going to say we issued it on January 1st. So we're going to pay the interest payment, the first interest payment, 6 months into it. So on the January or June 30th. And then it's going to go to interest expense. And then we credit cash because we're paying it out of cash for $3,000. And then we can move on. So the next one for 9, or 10, excuse me, we have Pine Top Corporation issued $150,000 10-year bonds at par. So we sold it for exactly what we wanted. The bonds have a stated rate of 6% and pay interest annually. What is the journal entry to record the sale of the bond? Super simple. Go to our little bond journal entry cheat sheet, and we have when they're bonds sold at face value, cash is what we receive, and we create a liability for the exact amount. So on, doesn't say what day, we're just going to slap January 1st, 2020, and we're going to have received cash of $150,000, and will be bonds payable for $150,000. And that's it. Then for 11, we have Medhurst Corporation issued $90,000 in bonds for $87,000. So they sold them at a discount. They sold them for less than the bond is payable. The bond had a stated rate of 8% and pay interest quarterly. What is the journal entry to record the first interest payment? So go to our cheat sheet. The interest payments, they're always going to look the same. Interest expense, cash, whether it's at a premium, at par, or at a discount. So we're gonna say it's on 6/30. We issued the bond on January 1, and now we're paying it on 6/30, 6 months in. And it's going to be to interest expense. And we're gonna credit cash, but we do need to figure out the amount. So the amount is, the interest is going to be equal to principal of the 90,000 times 8% times half a year. So 90,000 times 8% times half a year. So $3,600. Do half a year. 90,000. Oh, I'm sorry. Quarterly. Quarterly, that's important. So it should be, let's fix it. It should be 1/4 of a year, 0.25. Yes. And I want to correct this. It should be 0.25, representing 1/4 of a year. So pay attention to that when you do problems. Okay, I'm going to go over the exercises B really quick to make sure there's no confusing pieces there. So on 7, we are issuing bonds with a face value of 1,000, stated interest rate of 4%, received 105,000. What's the journal entry to record the sale of bond? So we're selling bonds 100 at $1,000. So $100,000 in bonds. We received 105,000. So it's going to be bonds at a premium. So we received cash of 105,000. The bonds payable was only 100,000, and then the premium on bonds payable, the difference between the two is going to be 5,000. So that's going to be journalizing a bond sold at a premium. You should be okay with that one. For 8, you have 50 bonds with a face value of 1,000, so 50 times 1,000, $50,000, with a stated rate of 4% and received 45,000. So you had bonds for 50,000, you sold them for 45,000. So you sold them at a discount. Again, cheat sheet to the rescue. You're going to put what you received in cash. The bonds payable is going to be 50,000. It's going to be the full amount. But you only received cash of 45,000. So the discount of the bonds payable is just going to be the difference between the two. So you should be okay with that one. For 9, Rue Incorporated issued 50 bonds with a face value of 1,000, so $50,000. Stated interest rate of 6% when the market rate was 6%. So they sold them at par. So it is going to be bonds sold at face value or at par. Cash, you just need to multiply what he got. So he got 50 bonds at 1,000, so $50,000. So cash of $50,000, bonds payable $50,000. Easy peasy. For 10, we have Piedmont Corporation issued 200,000 of 10-year bonds at par. The bonds have a stated rate of 6% and pay interest annually, so that makes it a little more simple. It's just interest times, to find interest, it's just principal times 6% times 1. So the first interest payment, they all look the same, but just for reference, it's going to be interest expense, cash. So interest expense, whatever the bond was, times the interest rate, and then paid out of cash. So in this case, it'd be 200,000 times 6%. So oops. 200,000 times 6%, so like $12,000. Interest expense, cash. And then for 11, you have Lunar Corp issued 80,000 in bonds for 87,000, so they issued them at a premium. The bonds had a stated rate of 8%, pay interest quarterly. Pay attention to that, quarterly. That's what tripped me up on the other one. What is a journal entry to record the first interest payment? So your interest, remember your interest payment journal entry looks the same for all of them. It's interest, interest expense and then cash. But to figure the interest for this one, it's 80,000 times 8% times 0.25. That's a fourth of a year because it's quarterly. Don't let that trip you up. And then you should be just fine in those as well.